This is a re-upload of the first episode of Marissa Unfiltered. Unfortunately, the upload for the first episode was absolute fucking dog shit. I don't know what happened with the audio, so I've decided to record it again. So I hope that this is better. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into the re-upload of the first episode, which is all about TMZ. And I won. And a 2, and a 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I'm starting on a silly note for some reason. Anyways, like I mentioned at the top of the show, this is a re-upload of the first episode. As I was uploading the second episode, I went to listen again to the first one, and there's just some sound quality issues that I just could not stand to listen to. So I've decided to re-upload it again, to re-record and then re-upload the first episode. This is being recorded after the second episode, which is all about LASIK. So yeah, but that shouldn't be an issue because I wasn't speaking about anything in the first episode that was like time sensitive anyways. So anyways, hello and welcome to Marissa Unfiltered, a podcast with me, Marissa. Before we get into the story that I want to talk about this week, I thought on the first episode it would be good to introduce myself and kind of explain why I wanted to start a podcast and all of that kind of stuff. So I wrote some notes because I am not very good at public speaking and I get really anxious and I forget what I want to say. So I just wrote some notes. So at times it may sound like I'm reading from a script because I kind of am, just so that I can articulate myself. So to introduce myself, my name's Marissa. I'm ageless. I'm in my 20s. I'm a Libra, Sag moon, Cap rising. I don't think that's necessary. I don't think that's necessary at all, but I like long walks on the beach. I like being given gifts and being told I'm cute. So yeah. I'm probably not going to put that in. I never know how to introduce myself. If I'm ever in a situation where I'm being told to introduce myself, I never know what to say. It's almost as if I just forget who I am. And because like what do you say without sounding like a douche when you're trying to introduce yourself? Anyways, I started this podcast a few years ago, actually. During the first lockdown, I was bored like everybody else and I was listening to a lot of podcasts at the time and I was like, oh, I could do that. I can do that. I've got things to say. And then I actually was quite good at uploading I was pretty consistent with it for a while, and then for a lot of different reasons, like personal issues and stuff going on at work. 2020 was a crazy time, okay? I just didn't feel like carrying on with it. And then earlier this year, I accidentally, on purpose, kind of deleted the whole thing off of the face of the earth because I was like, oh, do I want to do that? Am I actually gonna? And then literally in the space of maybe a week after I deleted it, I was like, actually, I do want to continue in the same kind of format that I had before. So why did I delete it? I just had like a bit of an existential crisis. So I just decided to start over. I locked myself out of the email address and everything that I used. So I had to like create new everything, which was really annoying. Some things I want to achieve here are hopefully, based on the kind of stories that I'm going to talk about, it's not something that I have in common with the people in my life that I love and care about. Some of this stuff they're just not interested in, and so I have no one to talk about them with. And so hopefully I can find like-minded people on the internet to talk about the weird shit that I'm into, away from my friendships. That's kind of one of the main things that I want to achieve. But above all of that, I started it initially because I realized that I was like not bad at public speaking, but I realized that I was so anxious at work. I used to have to do a lot of public speaking, and I was always so anxious, and just like I found that I was always tripping over my words and not making a lot of sense because I'm trying to get everything that's in my brain out before I forget. Because like one of the big things for me is like thinking of a really good point and then just forgetting to say it. So I wanted to be better at speaking and articulating myself, and also just like have fun. I just wanted to have fun expressing myself. At the time when I started for the first time, I felt like I didn't really have like a lot of spaces to talk about some of the things that I want to talk about in the way that I want to. So I mean, I guess that's why everyone does it. So the inspiration came from just me and my curious mind. I've always been interested in learning more about random things. Like if something ever caught my eye, I would always have to ask questions. I would always have to ask why. I remember when I was younger, my mum bought me like an encyclopedia set because I would always ask questions about like space and just like random things. And she was like, I guess she was tired of like always having to answer questions, so she was like, just read the books and leave me alone. So like, but I was always the kid who was like wanting to know more about something. If I learned something in school that I found really interesting, I would come home and I would like Google and go on YouTube and find more information about it, which is why I was really good at science when I was younger, because like so many different things around science that was really interesting to me, and I would just come home and Google them. And so like the next time I was in class and the teacher asked a question, I knew the answer because I did my own research. So I've always been a very curious person, always wanted to know more about different things. And when I was younger, I used to go on Wikipedia. I still do, I'm not gonna lie. I used to go on Wikipedia and YouTube and just like end up in rabbit holes looking at different things. For a while there, it was like a lot of conspiracy theories. I'm like, ooh, I want to know more about such and such thing. And I'm fascinated by cults and all of that kind of stuff. So I just felt like I wanted to do something with all of that information, because like I'd learn all of these things that I didn't know before, and then I'd have nobody to talk to about them. So this is just going to be a space for me to just offload all of the things that I've learned in my Wikipedia, Google, YouTube deep dives, and all the rabbit holes that I go down. This is just going to be a place for me to like talk to someone or talk at someone about them, even if it's just one person listening to this. So, and that's just a little bit about me. Hopefully over time, I'll express myself, and that will be a good way of getting a better sense of who I am. I'm not very good at explaining who I am or describing myself, but you just have to just observe me to get a sense of who I am. I'm silly. I'm a goofy person. I don't like to take things too seriously, so I don't want to take this too seriously either. This is a content warning before we get into the main story. This is a content warning. We will be discussing deaths. I'll be mentioning dead bodies a couple of times. I will be lightly touching on domestic violence. There's also content warnings for racism, homophobia, anti-Semitism. I think that's it, but I basically will be touching on a lot of hate crimes or situations that should probably be hate crimes, and also domestic violence. So if that's something that is triggering for you, I'm really sorry this isn't the episode for you. It will be smattered throughout, so sorry. But yes, let's get into the main story. Without further ado, let's move on from the introduction. I was going to do a news segment this week, but I feel like I've talked for long enough. So without further ado, let's get into the main topic. I need a jingle. I need a jingle. I feel like, let's get into the main topic, and then having a little jingle. I think that would be fun. Anyways, so this week we're going to be talking about the troubled history of TMZ. And it's important to note that the history of TMZ is still unfolding because it's still very much in operation. Although I don't really I've never really paid much attention to TMZ, but they're still an organization. They still expose people. So yeah. So today we're talking about the troubled history of TMZ. You may know TMZ for their salacious stories exposing celebrities, or perhaps it's the Kanye West slavery was a choice moment way before he became a full-blown bigot. Or was it the leaking of Michael Jackson's death and dead body? I could go on and on about the outlandish and sometimes sleazy stories that continue to come out of the TMZ machine. So it got me thinking, how did all of this start and how were they able to corner the market on celebrity gossip? That's what we'll explore in today's episode, The Troubled History of TMZ. So, TMZ started in 2005 as a collaboration between AOL and Telepictures, which is a subsidiary of Warner Brothers Television. Founder Harvey Levin was a lawyer in California for over 20 years before he started TMZ. In the 70s, he became well known for a TV debate about property taxes, and he capitalized off of that notoriety by becoming a contributor to a legal advice radio show. He kept building his public profile and soon became a TV producer before founding TMZ. Then came stories like Mel Gibson's DUI arrest, Britney Spears' meltdown, which now we obviously are able to call it what it is. She was in a mental health crisis. And they also published stories about Chris Brown's vicious attack on Rihanna, etc. They also became well known for breaking the news of the deaths of prominent celebrities like Brittany Murphy, Michael Jackson, and more recently, Kobe Bryant. BuzzFeed News described TMZ's range of coverage as the frivolous and the macabre. They cover celebrity banality news and celebrity death news really well. TMZ toes the line between investigative journalism and scandal. Although me personally, this is just Marissa speaking, I would argue that most people know them for the latter, and where the fuck is the journalism? Because TMZ, who the fuck are you kidding? You don't do any journalism, but we'll go on to talk about their journalism later on. When TMZ started, they were one of a kind in that prior to them, celebrities had tighter control over their image, and tabloid publications will often pander to celebrities in order to get a scoop. I am, of course, acknowledging the existence of the National Enquirer and Confidential magazine, but as someone in their 20s, they don't really stand out to me as much as TMZ does. They seem like relics of a bygone era. Confidential magazine had their heyday in the 50s and 60s, and the National Enquirer is best known for their catch and kill practices, whereby they would offer to pay people for stories about celebrities, usually stories involving SA and other just heinous things that celebrities have done. And instead of publishing these stories, they'd bury the stories, hence catch and kill. Ronan Farrow actually wrote a book and had a podcast about the catch and kill practices, specifically in relation to the Me Too era. I have the book, I've listened to the podcast, and I would recommend them. And I may do a separate episode on the National Enquirer because wow, like their history is insane, but they don't stand out to me as someone in my 20s as much as TMZ does. When TMZ arrived on the scene, they prioritized exposés and gossip, and the public loved it. And I think that's because finally the general public were able to see that celebrities are just like us. Now, I mentioned Mel Gibson earlier, and I will mention him a couple more times in this episode because he's a really good case study about how TMZ operates, basically. So I mentioned him earlier, and honestly, I only knew him from Braveheart and Apocalypto. So I had to Google what he did because I do remember him being quite a controversial person. And my goodness. So Newsweek published an article detailing his scandals, and this article came out in 2020 because Winona Ryder, who you may know as Joyce Byers from Stranger Things, Beetlejuice, The Heathers, etc., who coincidentally saw a downturn in her own career prospects after TMZ published several stories about her mental health struggles, as well as allegedly talking about her shoplifting habit back in the day. So she came out saying that Mel Gibson called her, and this is, by the way, where it's going to get very anti-Semitic. And I had to write my notes for this, and it's still like, this is the second time I'm recording this, and it's still like really jarring for me to talk about this because it's so disgusting. But Winona Ryder came out saying that Mel Gibson called her an oven dodger. And as I've read that for the first time, I felt so sick to my stomach. The Atlantic describes Gibson as a known Jew hater, and honestly, as I was going through, as I was reading the Newsweek article, I understand why. So this next bit is a quote from Winona Ryder about the incident where Mel Gibson was anti-Semitic towards her. She said, "We were at a crowded party with one of my good friends, and Mel Gibson was smoking a cigar. And we're all talking, and he said to my friend, who's gay, 'Oh wait, am I gonna get AIDS?' And then something came up about Jews, and he said, 'You're not an oven dodger, are you?'" How can you just say that? Like, the thing that gets me about people who are racist, homophobic, all of these hateful things, the thing that gets me about hateful people is the casualness with which they are hateful. Like, it seems so ingrained in their psyche that they can just say it like casually while puffing on a cigarette, like, "Oh, am I gonna get AIDS because I'm talking to," like, that makes no fucking sense. It's never logical, and it's so casual that makes the hate so much worse, in my opinion. There was also the tape of him screaming at his white girlfriend, where he casually mentioned her being essayed by black men, but he didn't phrase it in that way. He used the N-word, but I'm not going to. So far we have him hating gay people, Jewish people, and black people. What a lovely, delightful person. So I brought this story up about Mel Gibson because you could argue that exposing someone like that and exposing the things that he said about, all of these different groups serves the public good. People deserve to know that someone is a raging racist and anti-Semite and homophobe. Hatred like that should not be allowed to fester, and it definitely should not be rewarded. This is how I feel anyways. Mel Gibson isn't the only one. TMZ's also outed a lot of people in this way. Alec Baldwin is another good example. I don't know if Alec Baldwin has been like homophobic and all of that other stuff, but I do know that he hates his eldest daughter, or at least he did. That's what I know from TMZ. I, for one, would like to know who all the wrong-uns are so that I'm not supporting them either with my viewership or monetarily. One could argue that people like Gibson and Baldwin deserve to be punished, even if it's as benign as them not being on TV and in movies anymore. Sometimes the only ways to punish some of these people is through punitive means, because they're hardly going to go to jail. Some of these things aren't crimes, but as we know, legality does not always mean morality. TMZ also exposed Tiger Woods for cheating on his wife with what felt like all the women's in the fucking world. Do you guys remember that? That was wild. That was a wild time. And Donald Sterling, who was the owner of the San Diego / Los Angeles Clippers, which I think is a basketball team, and that's as much as I know. My name isn't Kid Fury. I'm not a renowned sports analyst, so don't ask me about sports. But I believe Donald Sterling also had a tape similar to the Mel Gibson tape where he was like shouting at his mistress, who was either fully black or mixed race, but she had some blackness, and he was like shouting obscenities at her and telling her she's gonna get raped by N-words, and it was just like really disgusting. So like all of the people I've mentioned so far, it's safe to say that if you're on TMZ's radar, your career is likely to take a massive hit. TMZ were also one of the first to delve into multi-platform dominance with their website and their TV show, and I believe they also had a magazine at some point. They might still do, I'm not sure. I didn't pick that up in my research, sorry. They also tried branching into scripted content on the CW, but that failed miserably. They had some kind of scripted programming on the CW, and it was cancelled after like something ridiculous like 4 or 5 episodes, which is really embarrassing. People have even parodied their TV show. I may be aging myself here, but I remember when Victorious had a version of TMZ where I believe it was Robbie who was going around exposing his friends in an increasingly mean-spirited way and using underhanded tactics to gain information about them, which I believe included like hidden cameras and stuff. It was, yeah. One of the things that stood out to me when looking into TMZ is how they always seem to be at the right place at the right time. In the beginning, it may have been luck. However, it is now a deliberate strategy, and there may have even been a few bribes, allegedly, sprinkled in here and there. How else would they be able to be the first when a celebrity is being arrested, dies, or does something stupid like berates their 11-year-old daughter calling her a fucking pig? Nowadays, the average Joe can sell footage to them, but I wonder how many police officers, coroners, lawyers, etc. they have on their payroll around the country in order to know what's happening in the celebrity world as it's happening. And like I said earlier, Harvey Levin, he used to be a lawyer, so he has a good insight and understanding of the legal system and how it protects people. So you could argue that he's used some of his connections, allegedly, and the knowledge he gained to further his business. By the way, as a complete aside, I believe TMZ rakes in something like 50 million, upwards of $50 million a year. So it's not like they're povos, you know, they've got money in the bank. Going back to Mel Gibson once again, in the BuzzFeed article I read, TMZ received a tip-off back in 2006 when Gibson was arrested. No specifics of where the tip came from, it just said that Gibson was arrested. Allegedly, the police even warned Harvey Levin against publishing the story, saying that it would destroy TMZ's operation, but they obtained the police report and convinced Warner Brothers' legal team to allow them to put it on their site. The police report confirmed that Gibson was a raging anti-Semite, and that was that. At this point, TMZ had developed a reputation for seemingly vindictively going after celebrities. However, a source told BuzzFeed that they only went after the Gibson story because the police attempted to cover it up. And honestly, when you hear something like that, as well as some of the other cases I mentioned previously, it might seem like they're exposing cover-ups or things that celebrities would like to hide in the interest of preserving their pristine public image. I mentioned previously that TMZ also dabbles in investigative journalism as well as tabloid gossip. However, it's important to note that many of their reporters, and I use that term very loosely, have no journalistic training whatsoever, which reflects in the quality of their reporting, in my personal humble opinion. They seem heavy on the exposing and very light touch on the handling with care. With that being said, let's look at some of the celebrity death reports that they've covered over the years. Firstly, they were the subject of a petition by Color of Change, which is a non-profit civil rights advocacy group, which asked that advertisers pull support from TMZ until the gossip outlet agreed to consult with black families before reporting on celebrity deaths. There was a point where they had a reputation for leaking celebrity death news before the families were even notified. Here are a few examples. In June 2009, Michael Jackson passed away. According to The Guardian, he died at 2:26 p.m. LA time, and by 2:44 p.m, TMZ had already informed the world of MJ's passing. They also reported on Brittany Murphy's death in 2009 after publishing various articles about her and allegedly speaking to a pharmacist who allegedly refused her drugs. And they spent a lot of time like reporting on her mental health issues. So it was just like really dodgy that they also like covered her death in a really disgusting way. In 2020, Kobe Bryant, one of his daughters, and several other people died in a horrific helicopter crash, and TMZ broke the story to the public before police were even able to inform the family or all of the families. Within a month of Kobe's passing, Pop Smoke passed away, and yet again, TMZ reported on it before the families were even told. In most of these cases, TMZ broke the news of the celebrity deaths way before the families were even notified by the proper authorities. And arguably, in all of these cases, they gave the families no time to come to terms with what happened before publicizing these stories. And you may think that that's the cost of being the first to break the story, but this isn't a cost that TMZ ever has to pay, unfortunately. Imagine finding out your loved one has died via TMZ, and perhaps they've even published the pictures of their dead bodies. How would you feel? TMZ has also been accused of being a boys' club, and that's clear to see, honestly, in the coverage of female celebrities and the fact that they used to feature upskirt shots of the likes of Britney Spears, Lindsay Lohan, etc. back in the day. That is such a crazy thing. Like, tabloids used to pay paparazzi people for images of celebrities, female celebrities getting out of cars where they're showing their knickers, and like they would plaster that all over the, like, for everybody to see. And that was just something that was normal. Like, what? There was also a lawsuit where a female staffer accused a high-level executive of sexism, favoritism, etc. towards the men in the organization, but the lawsuit was later dropped, and it was so hard to find any lawsuits or informations about lawsuits from TMZ. It's really, I think because they have so much dirt on people, it's hard for people to actually take legal action against them. In 2008, Harvey Levin said that what we're doing is not the fall of Western civilization. Celebrities are just people that other people invest in. And that's my takeaway in all of this. TMZ have hounded many people over the years, not respecting the dead. And when it's done in such a frivolous and never-ending way, it's sometimes hard to remember that these are just people. Because of that, more care should be taken with how certain things are reported. As consumers, it's up to us to decide what we tolerate, and surely at some point even the most famous person in the world is deserving of some level of privacy, especially after they die. There you have it, folks. My look at tabloid giant TMZ. The research process definitely jogged my memory on a couple of things. I forgot some of the stories that I talked about. So it was like going down memory lane for me a little bit, like remembering how wild the early 2000s were. I don't really have a strong opinion on TMZ. There definitely is a pattern suggesting a lot of unethical practices in terms of like receiving and publishing certain information about celebrities. It seems like they prioritize putting the information out there and not necessarily like vetting the information or taking the care to report on something in a compassionate way, especially when it comes to mental health. They also seem to like platforming people who really should not be platformed. Like, I that Kanye West video, and like when he visited them, that was like, that video boiled my, like, and I didn't really have an opinion on TMZ, and for the most point I still don't, but when they brought him in there and he was like talking about, oh, slavery was a choice, I was like, fuck these people. Because yeah, that one guy pushed back, but just in general, like, I'm going to need that sort of thing to stop. Yeah, so they like to platform people who really shouldn't have a platform, and they have a history of not treating women very fairly, whether it's staff members or celebrities. It would be interesting to see, if it ever happens, the expose of TMZ, whenever it is that, you know, their organization dies. It'll be so interesting to see all of the types of stories that they bury, the things, the information that they have on people, you know, how they get their information. I definitely think that they pay people, they have people either on payroll, or they incentivize, you know, like police and lawyers and stuff to give them information. Like, that seems very obvious, but I'm just gonna say allegedly. That's my personal opinion. But it'd be interesting to see if an expose ever comes about, if they ever get exposed when they have less of a death grip on celebrities. Because I think quite a few celebrities are still quite afraid of them. But the National Enquirer basically had their reckoning, so I'm sure TMZ will get there one day. And I would like to cover the National Enquirer as well, because some of the shady shit that they've done is like, so, like, it's insane. And I do remember they were like heavily tied to Donald Trump and stuff, and there's loads of stories that they buried for him and whatnot, so it'd be interesting to cover them. So that's the end of my look at TMZ. It definitely wasn't comprehensive, because there's just so much information. There's so many things that they've done, and there's so many, you know, like, meandering stories in there about TMZ. So in the future, hopefully, maybe I can do like a deep dive. But for the end of the episode, I wanted to end on a good note. So I think I'll keep this segment for all of the episodes, and this will just be a place for me to, you know, end on a high note. You know, some of the stories I might talk about may be a little bit dark, maybe a little bit, you know, disturbing, possibly. So I want to end in a nice heartwarming way with something that either warmed my heart or just something that I found funny. So this week, Brazilian President Lula da Silva is making good on his promise to evict illegal miners from tribal land. The Brazilian police have evicted dozens of illegal gold miners from the Yanomami Reserve, an area the size of Portugal, inhabited by around 35,000 tribespeople. Illegally mined gold accounts for around half of all the country's exports, which is insane. And a new environment of the Amazon division of the federal police is seeking international assistance in building a first-rate structure which will aim to target the outside funding toward and the sales from illegal gold mining, because it's big fucking business. They also plan to remove the miners from 6 other Amazon reserves this year, while setting up a permanent floating police station on a river in the Yanomami Reserve. This is honestly wonderful news. As someone who, you know, I have South American heritage, it warms my heart, because tribes people on the continent, and not even just tribes people on the continent, but indigenous people all over the world, it just feels like they've not been treated fairly for centuries at this point. So many governments are against, you know, giving indigenous people the rights they deserve and their own fucking land. Like, it just seems like a lot of governments are very much like in their colonial bag about like not observing the rights of indigenous people. So it's nice to see that there is a head of state who actually seems to care, especially in Brazil, where Bolsonaro, that man hated tribespeople. That was very, very clear. So it's nice to see this progress, and I hope it continues. And I just, in general, I think Lula is so cute. I'm so glad that he won the presidential race. Can you imagine if the presidential race was actually like a foot race? Oh my gosh, I'm so stupid. I don't know why that just came into my head, but imagine if politicians actually had to be they had to do like physical challenges in order to win political office. Like, that would definitely discount a lot of these old bastards who are currently running countries. I don't know why that came into my head. I'm sorry, but yeah. Anyways, if you're still with me to the end, don't forget to rate this podcast on Apple and Spotify and wherever else you listen. But let's be real, who's listening anywhere other than Apple and Spotify? Follow me and come back next week for another roller coaster ride where I'll be talking about something else that caught my attention. Hint, hint, it's about laser eye surgery and suicide. So yeah, that's a very interesting one. Anyways, and I hope you have a wonderful day whenever you're listening to this. I hope you drink water, go outside, tell someone you love them, steal from someone you hate, or just generally ruin their life. And bye.